Today I am very excited to make this video because I'm going to teach you one of my favourite moves in all of Sleight of Hand. This is the second deal tutorial. To the channel and welcome to a very special tutorial video because today I'm going to be teaching in as much detail as I possibly can the second deal. If you don't know what the second deal is, it is pretty much what it sounds like. It is a move in Sleight of Hand that looks like you're dealing cards fairly and you're actually dealing the card that is second from the top. You can do hundreds of tricks with the second deal and it has a ton of uses, including being able to force, control, retain, and switch. Imagine being able to do all of those things with just one sleight of hand move. Well, that's the second deal. I am so excited to teach this on YouTube. I'm jealous that you're going to learn this today. And that doesn't even make any sense because I'm the one teaching it. Before I go any further, this is what the second deal looks like. That was a quick look at the second deal, doing it in a sort of demonstration way by showing you with the top card face up. However, there are a ton of tricks that can be done with the second deal, as I say, but I'm not going to be teaching any of the tricks or uses for the second deal in this video. But once you've learned the second deal in this video, if you are interested in learning tricks and uses for it, then I have a whole project just on the second deal, which is called the Second Deal Project. It's a very imaginative title, I know. The Second Deal Project is a playlist of videos that I continue to add to when I want to teach new ideas and tricks with it. It's the most popular product on my website and a load of you guys have already picked it up and said how much you've enjoyed it, which is lovely of you, thank you very much. I don't want this video to turn into an advert for the project, but it does feel right mentioning it because this video is about the second deal, obviously. So at the end of this video, if you are interested, then you can click the link in the description or in the pinned comments and you can check out the Second Deal Project if you so want. It is half price at the moment, it is just £6. You get access to the playlist of videos and every video that I add onto it in the future. There we go, enough about the project. Now it is time to get into teaching the mechanics of this sleight of hand move. I'm so excited. You are going to need a deck of cards, but I feel like that's such an obvious thing to say, I'm not going to leave that in the video. In order to practice the second deal, I'd recommend taking a card and placing it face up on top of the pack, just so that it's clear to see where one card ends and another begins. That will make sense in a moment. I would also recommend not using borderless cards. So these, for instance, are borderless cards because the back design goes all the way to the edge. When you use those, it can be quite hard to see where one card ends and another begins, and that's not ideal when you're practicing the second deal. So don't use those. Now with some sleight of hand moves, often it is just one thing happening at a time which makes the magic happen. With the second deal, as with a lot of other deals like the bottom deal and the centre deal and so on, with the second deal, a lot of things are happening at the same time which work together to make this effective. I'm going to focus on the sleight of hand just to start with, and then in a moment I'm going to explain a little bit about the body language and how to make this convincing. There are a lot of subtle things that will make this work. The first thing with any sleight of hand move involving cards is the grip. How do you hold the cards? and you hold them like this. You're going to place the cards into your hand so that the corner rests in the sort of pad area of your thumb just here. These 3 fingers are along the side, and your index finger should be curled around the front like so, and your thumb can go from here to here, and this is where it will be when it starts to deal. So the cards are sort of ish forward in the hand like so, and you really want to sort of dig the corner of the deck into the pad of your thumb, because when you begin to move your thumb, that is where the card is going to sort of rotate from. It's almost like a hinge that acts around this point of the sort of lower left corner of the deck. So this is the grip right here, and once you've got that grip down, you're ready to start moving things. And the first thing I'm going to tell you about is just with this hand, which we'll call the dealing hand, you're going to learn about the thumb movement. So the thumb can obviously rest on the side of the deck like so in mechanics grip when it's not dealing, but when it is time to deal, your thumb can move to here so that it is almost touching the tip of your index finger. The two should almost be in line, but they're not going to touch each other. The first movement you need to get used to is this movement right here, which is moving the top card around. Now, this movement doesn't happen so that the card just goes sideways. It also doesn't happen so that the card goes backwards or forwards or anything like that. It's sort of a diagonal, so that you open up 2 gaps. The first gap's going to be here, and it's going to be quite a large one, and the second one's going to be here. It's going to be smaller, but not too small, and the more you open that gap up, the easier the second deal will be when you take that card. So that's the first movement, the thumb movement right there, just moving sideways down so that the card sort of pokes above the ring finger and the little finger. You want the tip of your middle finger to still be visible when that card has moved, but it sort of covers the other 2, if that makes sense. The next thing to worry about is the hand that takes the cards. So with this gap open, and we'll leave it open, and we'll call this the brief, by the way, this gap is called the brief. With the brief open like so, it is your thumb that's going to come across and strike that card and pull it out and deal it onto the table. At this point, you also need to be worrying about the pressure that this thumb is applying onto this top card, because if the pressure's too much, you won't be able to take the card underneath, and if the pressure is too little, you might accidentally take both cards. So it's sort of a medium pressure on that card just so that it can be moved out of the way, and then your other thumb comes across, strikes this card, which gives it the name of the strike second deal, drags it out, and it just sort of holds it lightly between the other fingers. It can then deal it to the table. And you need to get used to this idea of taking cards from the gap. So the first thing I'd recommend practicing is just taking cards with the top card moved to the side like so. You don't need to worry about moving that card at all, just practice this. With the brief open, just taking cards. Seems like a very mundane thing to practice, but it will really help you get used to when you eventually have to move this thumb and this card. The other thing you should be practicing is moving this back and forward very quickly so that it squares up perfectly when it's back in position, because inevitably you're going to want this gap to open and close naturally as if that card has been taken. To explain what I mean, I'll just turn this card over and do a fair deal. You'll notice that when I fair deal, this card moves across, I take this card, and then obviously when it's dealt, all the cards here are squared up. So if we now apply that to a second deal, with this card obviously like so, instead of taking this card, I'm taking this card, but in order for that to be convincing, these cards still need to be squared up when that card is dealt. This is where timing is so important in the second deal, because as this hand approaches the other cards, you want this gap to open up, and as soon as that card has left, these cards now need to square up perfectly, and that needs to repeat like so, and you can practice this slowly, so that you just get used to the idea of opening that gap and closing it for just the right amount of time so that you can take that card and the deal looks natural, like so. And that is essentially the second deal, the very, very basic mechanics of the second deal. There are a few nuances, a few little extra movements that involve the sort of wider parts of the body in a way that will make this more convincing, but as far as the hands go, this is it. So I'll just recap. The thumb goes here, and it can move to here for the grip. It's a medium pressure so that you can move that card out of the way, and you open the gap as the hand approaches, you close the gap as the hand leaves, and you take cards from here with your thumb, and the 2 thumbs and the hands are in sync together to create the second deal, like so. So it's a very, very simple action. It really is not a complicated piece of sleight of hand, but now it's time to add in some other movements that will make this even more brilliant. The next thing we're going to learn about is called the tilt, and it is a movement of the wrist which will hide the second deal and make it even more invisible to the eyes of the audience. And it looks like this. So this right here is the tilt, and you'll notice that what's happening here is that the face of this card is being tilted away from the audience member's eye line ever so slightly just as the card is being dealt. So I'll just pause there, and that right there is the tilt. I'm stopping so that you can see that that card actually goes out of view, and when the card is face down, obviously not face up, when the card is face down, it really just looks like that card is being dealt, because you're not looking directly at the brief when the card is being taken, just due to that wrist movement. And it's just that, it's just a slight up and down movement, which is natural because if we were dealing cards normally like I am now, there would be a wrist movement. So it just makes the second deal even more convincing, but also helps to hide the fact that you're not actually taking that top card, you're taking the one underneath. So that wrist movement just helps to hide that fact a little bit more. Zooming out a little bit further, you can now see that there's some arm action involved that will make this even better. So in this case, the hand that's taking the cards will be doing the moving, like so. You can see it's doing most of the moving and the taking, but you can also switch that around so that the other hand is the one doing the moving. It really doesn't matter, these are just two variations, but one of those variations is slightly riskier. You'll notice the first one I did has the face of the card not tilting away as much. And that is perfectly fine because this movement will still be able to hide the second deal. I also want to make a quick point about looking natural, because a lot of times when people do sleight of hand, they look at their hands when they do the action. So if I do a pass, sometimes people look at the deck when they're doing the pass, and that is so bad because what you're telling the audience is, I'm looking at the deck, so something is happening. You need to remember that in the eyes of the audience, nothing is happening. So as with the pass, all I'm doing is squaring up the cards, for instance. With the second deal, all I'm doing is dealing cards. That's all I'm doing. So I don't need to look at the cards all the time. Obviously, if I'm being really obvious and looking away, that might be sort of double bluff, even more suspicious. But you can glance at the cards every so often, but you can also make eye contact with the audience and look at where the cards are being dealt rather than the hand that's dealing them. Just to emphasise that there's nothing weird going on here. You don't need to be looking at them like that as if something is really happening. Anyone that knows about misdirection will know that actually the name misdirection is a little bit bad because it's not misdirection. You're sort of directing their attention towards things rather than away from things, so it's a bit of a weird name. And one of those things, one of the things that I think is really powerful, is when you lean in to something, instantly the audience sort of feel like they're leaning in as well, that something important is happening. So in a rising card routine, for instance, not that I like rising card, but let's imagine a side card is rising to the top. I'm leaning in this moment to sort of add drama, and people then focus in and they think something is happening. Now if I put the deck down and I lean back, and I take my hands away from the deck and I'm looking at people, it sort of feels like the trick is over, and that's called offbeat misdirection. So in the sort of offbeat of the trick is now over and you lean back, that psychologically tells them they can lean back and take their eyes off the ball. Now if I'm still holding the deck and I do that, the cards are in my control and no one is looking, because they think that they're in an offbeat, everyone relaxes, and the dirty work can happen. Similar with the second deal, you don't need to be leaning in during the second deal as if something is happening. This can just be a necessity to get to the trick. Now I talk about this a lot on Patreon, and in a lot of tutorials my patrons will know that I talk about necessities in tricks, because the dealing isn't really part of a trick. Dealing is a very boring part of a trick. Anyone that's performed any card at any number will know that when they're dealing the cards, it's very, very boring. Dealing cards in tricks is always boring. You can't really make it interesting. There's nothing interesting about counting cards onto a table. So you can use that to your advantage, but you sort of act as if it's a necessity. So you don't lean in, you can lean away. You say, okay, well, we'll deal 10 cards. And you're looking around. You don't need to make this the most interesting part of the trick, even though the second deal is something you've worked really hard on. To the audience, you're just dealing cards. It doesn't need to look like you've worked hard on it at all. Obviously, this advice only applies if you're doing a trick in which the second deal is used in a secret way. Now, I think my second deal is good enough where I don't need to use it in a secret way, and to audiences, I often demonstrate the second deal and say, look, I'll turn the face card face up, so that you can see what I'm doing, and I show them the second deal, and it gets great reactions. People love that because they're seeing sleight of hand, and they love the idea that they're being let in on a bit of the secret. But also, it looks impressive. It looks like a card is melting through the deck. It really blows people's minds. So, unless you're at the level where you can do that, your second deal needs to be misdirected away from in a very, very clever way. So as just mentioned, you can use that offbeat sort of leaning back, this isn't important sort of misdirection, or you can simply use the wrist movement, do it right in front of them, and they won't notice. Don't run before you're being chased, so don't feel like they're seeing the second deal, because I have had burning spectators absolutely look at my hands when I'm doing a second deal and they don't notice anything, because if you're doing the second deal in a natural, convincing way, no one is going to question that you're not dealing cards normally, because why wouldn't you be? They don't know what a fake deal is. So you need to act like it's a normal deal, and part of that comes with making it look like you are dealing cards how you normally would. Film yourself dealing cards normally, see how that looks, and then mimic it with a second deal. And so make the two the same thing. They need to look the same, they need to feel the same speed, the same rhythm, the same everything, because ultimately, to an audience, they are the same. I know it seems ridiculous that I'm banging on a lot about how to stand and look natural when you're dealing cards, but it really is very important, because if you get that wrong, then no matter how good the sleight of hand is, it'll be ruined by the fact that you look suspicious. If you're doing it perfectly and precisely and beautifully, elegantly dealing cards, then it looks like you've spent time perfecting your deal. And you don't want that. You want it to look like, yeah, I'm just dealing cards. What? There's nothing special about this. One more thing I'm going to tell you about, I've just remembered, is the psychology of dealing one card. Because quite often I find myself second dealing just once in a row. I don't often second deal, one after the other, Quite often it is just one card being dealt, and in those situations there's a lot of body language that is very subtle that will help emphasise that. Let's imagine I'm doing a card control in which they are holding half the deck, I'm holding half, and I've got the king of clubs, and all I'm going to do is lose it into the middle of the deck by dealing it like so, squaring it up, and instantly, in the snap of a fingers, their card is on top. The snap is not required. So that was a very, very basic card control. You probably wouldn't do that as a trick because it's a little bit too basic, but involved in some grander, bigger trick, that would be a perfectly fine way of controlling a card to the top. Because obviously the card isn't ever in the middle, it's sort of a retention using the second deal, obviously. So half the cards are here, and that can be in their hands, which I think is a lot more powerful, because they sort of feel the control when it's in their hands. So you have the king of clubs, and I did a very clever, well, I'm saying very clever, but it's me, so that's a bit big-headed, but I'm doing a clever psychological thing to make them follow that card, and again, feel that control happen in their hands. So what I do is quite simply turn my attention from one place to another and follow their card. Obviously it's not, but I take their card like so, I second deal it and I drop it into their hands, and right away I just did it. My entire attention is now on these cards, trying not to knock them off the table, and I've basically just ignored these cards. Even though the king of clubs is here, I'm not now looking at that. Even though I've second dealt, I'm not still looking at these cards. I'm looking at these cards because that's where their card is. These other cards are now just treated as a necessity to lose that card in the deck. I don't really look at them when I do that, I just put them on top, and it makes that control even more powerful when you're not holding the deck, that their card is then on top. So there we have it. That is the second deal tutorial, a video I've wanted to make for such a long time, focusing on this sleight of hand move and the psychology that goes with it that makes it what it is. I really enjoyed making this video and sharing this with you, and once again, if you did enjoy this video, then you would really like the second deal project, which is full of loads of tricks that you can do with the move, as well as loads of other advice. The project itself is available for £6 over on my website, but it's also on my Patreon, which is just $5 a month. Plus you get all of the other tutorials that are on there, teaching all of my favourite magical creations. I make lots of exclusive tutorials on Patreon, so if you feel like you'd enjoy that, then please go and look at my Patreon. I've got loads of stuff planned for Patreon, and I can't wait to share even more tutorials with them. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. But in the meantime, I am still going to be here making YouTube videos, of course, and I've got a very exciting video called How to Start a Career in Magic coming soon. And for that video, I actually need your help. So the video is obviously about how to start a career in magic, and I need you guys to submit questions that you have about how to start a career in magic. It can be anything, it can be personal, it can be a very general question, or it can be very specific. It's completely up to you, but if you have a question about how to make money with magic, then send a video of you asking that question to my email address, which is right here, hopefully. I actually can't see it, but hopefully in the edit I'll add it in. That would be weird, just a floating email address, just magically summoned. When you submit your question video into me, I will pick my favourites and answer them in the video. I'm hoping to make it a big video just giving all of my advice on how to make money with magic, because it is my #1 asked question, so look out for that video, that's coming very soon. And also, my Britain's Got Talent audition, I'm going to be reacting to it. That is coming soon to the channel as well. So if you don't want to miss any of those videos, or you don't want to miss when I go live, because every so often I live stream on YouTube, then there is a notification button that you can press down below. I don't always ask you to press it because I think it's a bit cringy asking you to press that button, but if you don't want to miss a video or a live stream, then you can click that button and you will get a little ding dong when I make a video. Thank you very much for watching this video. It has been a pleasure, and I will see you in the next video.